Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Global Homeroom with Reach the World. I'm your host, Colin Teague. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week. On behalf of Reach the World, thank you to all the amazing teachers all around the world for everything you do. This year, teachers have really gone the extra mile to ensure that their students continue learning during the pandemic. At Reach the World, we have seen teachers juggling virtual and in-person classes, engaging parents and guardians at an unprecedented level, learning new technology on the fly, leading lessons while wearing personal protective equipment, replicating classrooms in their homes, and of course, taking their students on incredible virtual adventures. One such teacher is Brooklyn PreK educator Jessica Lorenzana. As one of only a handful of PreK teachers who participate in Reach the World, Jessica is an outstanding example of how global education is beneficial to early childhood classrooms and how the content can be adapted for younger students. Jessica is joining us today to talk about her background as an educator and her experience taking her PreK classrooms on global journeys. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Can you tell us a little bit about your background as an educator and what inspired you to teach?
Sure. So growing up, I have a twin, and my sister and I, we both had hearing and speech delays. So that meant that, we were talking late. We didn't really get to talk till we were about 4 years old. And at the time, pre-K was only for families who could afford it. It's not like now there's pre-K for all in New York City, and it's basically free for all families. So, we always kind of struggled in school. But I remember my mom always saying, your teachers always helped you to succeed, especially our speech teachers, our hearing teachers, and our teachers in the elementary setting. Elementary is amazing, and that's why I became an elementary teacher, because that's like the core and the foundation, which is why I think I became a pre-K teacher. It's just because, teachers who have taught in early childhood have helped me so much to grow that I would like to do that for other students.
And I think that's a great reason to enter the profession. How did you become interested in global education? And have you had a chance to travel at all yourself?
So, growing up, we also grew up with a single mom, and so we couldn't really afford to travel. But my grandparents are from Puerto Rico, so that's pretty much my traveling experience, is that I've been to Puerto Rico. In terms of like going outside of the States or outside of the Caribbean, when we started the DOE about 5 years ago. My sister's also a teacher. Our first paycheck, we took my mom to Israel, because growing up we couldn't really travel a lot, and especially halfway around the world. So we got to take her to Israel, and we stood there for 3 weeks, and it was just phenomenal, especially coming from New York City into the desert and seeing how it is out there. It was just such an amazing experience, and it was a rich experience. It taught us a lot. Even my mom, that is 50 years old, she's like, you're never too old to learn something new or to learn about the world. So I think global education is just fascinating. And I think it's amazing how Reach the World came into our school, PS 120. Other than that, I've never really, saw global like teaching about the world was only taught through the textbooks. It was never taught from a traveler who experienced it personally. And I think Reach the World is a great program that teaches that teaches, history, geography. Shouldn't just be taught through a book. It should be taught through like real life experiences. And I think the travelers really bring that to our students, which is amazing, because a lot of our students, they grew up like me and my sister, where they couldn't afford to travel outside. A lot of our kids, our schools in Brooklyn, Bushwick, and it's, a lot of kids don't leave that community. They don't even know that there's a whole other world outside of New York City. They don't even know what the countryside looks like or what the desert looks like. So definitely I'm interested in teaching global learning through personal experiences.
Did you have a chance to share that experience in Israel with your students when you came back?
I did. I showed them a couple of videos and pictures. I definitely want to put it like in a PowerPoint so that way it's a little bit more organized. And it's also very time consuming to do that on top of teaching all the different subjects. But again, this is why I love Reach the World because you guys make it so easy. Like I tell you the unit topic and then you relate it to what we're learning. And so I think it's great having you guys teach me how to present it, right? And how to be more organized. And if I don't have time, you guys already have everything for me and other teachers to correlate it within our own curriculum.
Well, thank you. But it's also important for you to know that we really rely heavily on your expertise working with an early childhood audience to be able to tailor these resources for your students. And that leads me to my next question. Many early childhood educators are a bit hesitant to sign up for a program like Reach the World. Um, why do you think global education is important for early childhood students? And how have you adapted a program like ours to your classroom?
So yeah, I think one of the biggest fears that teachers have is, oh, this is something else that I have to teach, right? As a teacher, alongside from math, reading, writing, teaching social and emotional skills, especially at an early childhood level, you cannot teach a young child like academics or any concept or about global history unless they have unless they have school readiness skills. So for early childhood teachers, especially, it's like, I'm just trying to get this kid to adjust to school life and not cry because he misses his mom and dad, let alone teach them about global history, such a big topic. But I think what's great about Reach the World is you guys do try to work with us, you try to see how we can make it fun for them. And I think global learning can be fun. It's just how you present it. And it's more than just showing them a book, right? Especially with early childhood, they like to be more interactive. So having them see pictures, videos, and having them talk with the traveler and giving them opportunities to ask questions is really what I like about the Reach the World program. And our kids, that's all you need. You just need to talk to them, show them visually and ask them questions too. Have they ever been traveling? And a lot of them, some of them do travel, but most of them don't. And I think that's what's going to grab them is to say, well, have you been here and take a look at here? So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think you do a really amazing job, and I know that when we have calls with travelers with your classroom, it's really helpful for not just Reach the World, but for also the travelers who you're connecting with to have you there on the call to help frame things for your students and scaffold the content that we're learning about a little bit for their age group. We've spoken quite a bit about just in the news, in public discourse, everyone's been talking a lot about how COVID has impacted children, but specifically we've heard a lot about children around kind of in that adolescent age where, oh, they need to socialize with each other. It's so important to their mental health. But what about pre-K? We haven't talked a lot about how how the pandemic has impacted early childhood students, and they're in that really formative stage of their life where they're learning how to interact with each other, adapting to being outside of their home, being in a school environment. How has this pandemic impacted those students?
Well, in early childhood, social and emotional development is so important. And you're right, a lot of our kids, they've been stuck at home. They haven't, been going outside as much. and it's been boring for a lot of them. They kind of don't know what to do with themselves, and then the parents try to make it engaging, but they don't really have the means or the resources or the knowledge to not just entertain them but to also teach them. So with teachers, that's where we come in, right? We're like, these are the contents that you can teach them so that it can take them to the not just the next grade but like throughout their lifetime. Really, with remote, it's teaching them, hey, it's not over, like what is it that I want to say? There are still interest areas. There are still ways to teach your children to be interested in the future. It's not the end. Yes, it's been a very devastating time. A lot of people are getting sick. A lot of people have lost loved ones. But what can we do, right? What can we do to help? And so what we really try to teach is, yeah, this is going on. People are getting sick, but what can you do about it? Can you be a doctor? Can you find a cure for the coronavirus? This is not just affecting us in here in New York City, but it's affecting us all around the world. So what can we do? And so I think Reach the World fits in that, well, there are many different professions, right? There are people that travel around the world to try and help and see what's going on in the world. So for our kids, like what we teach is like, we're going to have these travelers, and these travelers are going to teach us, about different topics and about these different places. And then from there, the more we learn about where we live, the more we can save, the more we learn about the world, the more we can save the world. Even if we are in a pandemic, we can still learn. And I think that's what Reach the World brings is teaching our kids that they can still learn and they can learn in a fun way.
We've had some really fun video conferences with you guys, and you mentioned having to not only engage your students in the classroom, but also the parents, since so much of your class is at home. How have you been able to get such high engagement from your parents? I mean, I've seen parents on every video call we've had with you. They've been very engaged. They've been helping their children ask questions. How have you been able to achieve this during the pandemic?
I have to say, like having open communication with the parents and telling them about like what their kids are going to be learning. I notice engagement has been going more up since we did the virtual field trips. So what I started doing was like getting YouTube videos. So like if we had a water unit, so I found a YouTube video on the aquarium, and then that started getting them in. So like I said, early childhood, even with kids and parents, they're more engaged than rather when it's just a book. They like to see pictures, they like to see videos. And then when I said, well, Reach the World, they not only show us pictures and videos of trips, but you get to speak to someone about their experiences. So I think a lot of the parents like that. They're like, it's not just our kids just sit down and just look at a video, but they get to actually engage in communication. And I think that's what the parents like, that their kids, because it's easy to just turn on the TV and say, sit here and watch this. But what the parents like is, hey, you're talking, you're socializing with other people. So I think that's what they really like most.
It's interesting how you now have to consider um, not just student engagement in your lessons, but parent engagement as well now.
Oh, that's like the biggest struggle is how do we get them interested, right? So, and that's what we try to, our study of units are pretty interesting and they have to do with everyday life. And like kind of how you said, reach the world. That's the whole purpose of traveling and seeing how people live, right?
How do you teach geography to pre-K students, and when do you think we start seeing most students grasping that difference between one country and another, and like the different types of spaces that we have, like cities versus towns versus states versus countries?
Yeah, that's a very hard concept for our pre-K kids to grasp. So what we do is each of our study of units, like I said, it has to do with like everyday life that, things that people go through. So our study of unit on plants, we learn about where plants live, where trees live, how those plants and those trees give us fruits and vegetables. And fruits and vegetables, we eat them and it helps us to grow. And so one of the ways that we try to kind of integrate the whole idea of geography is, well, this is an orange tree. And a lot of the orange trees they're not really made in New York City. There's just regular trees in New York City. But if you go upstate New York, it's more countryside. And there you may see some, trees that make fruits. And then from there, we can go where Florida has a lot of orange trees and a lot of fruits. And then from there, we go into, the Caribbean islands, like Puerto Rico, where I'm from, they have a lot of coconut trees. And that's like how we go from there. And then we also talk about where the different plants grow in different places. So we started talking about how cactus plants grow in the desert. And then we can go into different countries and what countries have deserts in them. So that's how we kind of extended.
And that's a great way of helping them understand. I can already see how that conversation we had with Colin about polar bears versus penguins and where they live, and you could see that they're starting to categorize where some of these species live and how to remember it. And that's definitely helpful, especially because they'll be learning about pretty soon about an animal that only lives in a very specific part of the world in Australia. So hopefully it will help them understand a little bit about where different animals live in the world.
Yes, I'm super excited about that. When we teach the babies unit, we usually do baby monkeys or baby chicks. Baby chicks you can see in the children's farm or the children's zoo, and you can also see baby monkeys in the zoo in the city as well. But you never see a kangaroo. So it's like, where would you need to go to see a kangaroo? You kind of have to get out of the city, and there's a special place around the world, and that's where you can find the kangaroos and kangaroo babies.
I wonder why there are not more kangaroos in zoos.
Yeah, and that's a good question. We can ask the students, right? And I think that's what's so great about pre-K is that uh, even myself as a teacher, as an adult, I'm still learning all these things, and I'm starting to ask these questions. Like, when I speak to my friends who aren't teachers, they would never think, why is there no kangaroos in zoos? It's not until you go back to school or you're in the setting or you're around kids that they start to ask you these questions, and then you start to ask yourself. So I guess that's pretty much why I became a pre-K teacher and why I love being a pre-K teacher, and why I love programs that promote education and higher learning.
Well, we're really glad that you enjoy working with us. It's so much fun to work with pre-K students, to see them really open their eyes and become so curious about the things that some of our explorers and travelers are showing them. So it's just a pleasure to work with them, and we really hope that more pre-K and early childhood classes will start using our program because, like you said, it's such a great way to get students engaged in what they're learning about and to open their minds to curiosities and questions that they might have.
Totally agree. And the best part is to get them to want to travel and to learn more. If we don't present it to them, they won't know, they won't know about the desert. They won't know about, the polar bears in the North Pole. So I definitely agree. Definitely agree that we need global education and we need to make it fun, and programs like you guys definitely make it, fun.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for your great insight on early childhood education. As always, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And that's all we have time for today. Don't forget to follow Reach the World's channel on YouTube and tune in for our next episode of Global Homeroom on Monday, May 31st.